What's going on, everybody? Double Axis podcast number 8. I am finally feeling well, so no coughing fits or anything this time, so pretty psyched about that. A super busy week, pretty much in all facets of news and events. So I want to kind of go over a bunch of stuff. Did you have a good week, Dave? We survived another one.
Yeah, it was a great week for me. Good week for me.
Great?
Yeah, great week for me.
Something happened?
Oh, I got a new job at work. And
Oh yeah, you got a promotion?
yeah,
Is that what you're trying
I
to
don't have
say?
work Saturdays anymore. So
Oh, that's
it's
sweet,
nice.
because you had to work last Saturday after the
Yeah.
podcast. We were
Yeah, so that's cool for me.
talking about it. Yeah, little bit of a delay getting the podcast out because my internet was down, but we got a fancy new modem, and it did not upload any faster, just for the record. So pretty bummed about that. So I think we're going to cover a bunch of news. Like I said, it's a pretty eventful week, so no real shortage of topics here. So what are we going to break into first, sir?
All right, let's talk about the issues. Like, we'll talk about the NFL. It's something that, North Korea is going to launch a nuke at us. Puerto Rico is underwater. Everything's destroyed. But
No power.
This is what America's just is destroying the country, man.
Is
We'll
it?
talk about the NFL. What's
Is
going
it
on?
destroying the country? Is that
Well,
what
today-
Facebook is it Facebook official?
Yeah, today I had a lady. She goes, "I'll be glad when all these sponsors pull out from this," and she wouldn't even say it. And pointed at the NFL shield at a gas station I was at today. And
Wow.
yeah. And
Well,
people
it's
are-
funny that you say that
Yeah.
because they're sharing clickbait like Budweiser has officially pulled out of the NFL.
Yeah. Not sure if that's true yet. I mean, that's what that lady told me when she said that.
She said Budweiser did?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I'm pretty sure it would be all on every news.
Yeah, because the NFL makes so much money. Even even the Super Bowl, like, it's such a small part of the NFL, but they have whole TV shows dedicated to commercials that they play during NFL games.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
it's a little,
We've been talking about it. We joke about it off camera, but like when is our magic meltdown gonna happen? And it's probably gonna happen right now because what I'm gonna say is probably gonna stop hearts across the United States. My take on all of it is that Trump is smarter than people are giving him credit for. There's the hot take, and here's why. Everybody's talking about the NFL, and nobody's talking about healthcare reform. Nobody's talking about tax reform. Nobody's talking about the problems that you mentioned. We're all completely and totally wrapped up in what these guys are doing on the field. And I think that might have been the intent of his comments, and now it's just started a fire. I mean, it's just basically the equivalent of a brush fire. And I just think it's pretty sad that this is kind of what's taking over everything, and I feel like it's messing with the NFL stars' head as well because everybody's taking a knee, but I mean, is anybody even really sure what they're taking a knee for? Is it just because Trump said this? Is it because they're trying to take a stand? I mean, all of these guys do a lot of things off the field, and that's probably what they should be highlighting. What are they even really highlighting here other than getting some headlines? And I honestly feel like I feel like it was politics at its best. It's just a smokescreen for all of the stuff that you mentioned, and the fact that my health care is still unaffordable, and we're all being taxed at super high rates, and nobody's talking about it. All the focus is on the NFL and these stars, and kind of putting blame on them.
yeah, but I wonder why Trump wouldn't want people to know about the health care and tax problems, because he's trying to do something, and the Republicans in the Senate are like,
Yeah, it's just spinning wheels, though. I mean, it's not
yeah,
getting
I mean,
accomplished.
I mean, I guess it is his fault, but I mean, at the same time, it's not like he's not trying to push for it.
Right, but it's just like every other politician,
Yeah.
when they don't achieve what they promised on the campaign trail, they have to throw something else out, and it kind of takes your attention from
Yeah.
here to here.
Yeah, it's just.
And now everybody's focusing on the NFL.
But even the
and-
Romans always said, you gotta give the people their bread and circus, and this is definitely America's circus.
For sure,
yeah.
for sure.
When you start trying to mess with these guys, I think that's why we saw such an explosion of this weekend. It was a reaction to the things he said. It wasn't as much as that as much as like standing up for the guys that he was talking about originally. And that's what we're
Gotcha.
seeing everybody else.
That makes sense.
Like Aaron Rodgers saying people should link arms and.
But my point of it is like nobody's saying this is why I'm kneeling. They're just kneeling.
Yeah.
And then you have the debacles like what happened with the Steelers where Mr. Villanueva chose to come out of the tunnel, and now it's caused dissension amongst his team, and it's just, I mean, I don't even know what to think of it anymore. I think it's, like we said on the last podcast, I think it's everybody's right to do whatever they choose.
Yeah.
And a lot of the soldiers and stuff that I've seen talking about it say, I fought for the right for them to express themselves however they choose. And I just wish that it wasn't so publicized. I think that people do it just because it's going to get headlines, and that's sad and unfortunate. I feel like it's the way that Kaepernick stayed relevant.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure that he's ever even said why he took a knee, and now everybody's doing it. And I just wish that everybody's point was a little bit more clear, and there wasn't just hatred on both sides. I mean, I don't see the point of either side of them if you're not gonna clearly state, where you're coming from, and that way we can all figure out how to move past it.
I agree. I think that it's, protest is meant to be uncomfortable, and these guys have done a real good job at, drawing so much attention to themselves, bad or good. But, they haven't really seen any plans to go, where do we go from there? Like, all right, we know we have the knowledge, like awareness of what they're protesting, or maybe we don't. But we see that they're protesting.
Right.
We're seeing game. Like, that's the part that gets me. It's like, how are we going to solve this? I don't see any solutions to what, their problems they have. So I kind of agree with you there.
Yeah, it's just kind of like everything else. Everybody's just spinning their wheels. They're mad, and they burn jerseys and everything else. And I mean, they probably spent hard-earned money on those jerseys and those tickets and everything else. And I don't know where it's headed. Like you said, everybody's talking about the ratings being down in the NFL because of this. I'm not sure if it's because of this or not. I just think that, like we talked about, a lot of the primetime games and stuff weren't delivering. They're boring.
Yeah.
And, just not really something that I want to spend my time, staying up late and being miserable the next day at work for something that's
I agree.
not that entertaining.
It's not worth my sleep at this point.
Yeah. So, but I try not to get caught up in all of it because I feel like being angry and lashing out and doing all these things, I'm not really sure what it solves.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not really sure that as an individual they care that much about you either way. So I just wish that everybody would kind of figure out a way to get together to make it constructive instead of everything just seeming like it's so destructive. And I really don't know what the answer is. I don't know how.
Yeah,
at this point, I don't know. At this point, it seems like they've kind of went scorched earth on both sides. And like I mean, do you really think that everybody's going to give up football?
No, that's what the lady I was telling you about was referencing. That's what I told her. I said, it's the biggest sport in America, even though that people say the NFL's ratings are down.
Right.
It's still leading in, primetime television when it's on.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just.
But do you think that lady even actually watched the NFL?
Yeah, that's what I asked her. I said, well, I didn't, because the way I just said it made it sound like I was like an a-hole about it. Like, did you guys watch football? But I was like, well, because I kind of went to the point like you were saying, the product that you're watching isn't as good. Like, I don't know if it's just where it's week 3, like where it was, but it still seems kind of sloppy to me. Like, every game I've watched has been a snooze fest.
Yeah. Last
night I tried to watch some of the game. It was actually kind of an interesting game. I'm not going to lie.
Right.
I enjoyed that game. I don't like the Packers or the Bears.
Yeah. A lot of that's kind of like just a rivalry, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that's what's intriguing about that. I didn't watch last night, not because I'm protesting or anything. I just haven't really stayed up and watched any of the primetime games. So, I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of people just express their opinion just for the sake of expressing their opinion to feel like they're a part of something.
Yeah.
And, I've always been told never come to the table with a problem unless you have a solution. And so I'm just trying to stay out of it. I just wish that, like I said, everybody could really get everything together and figure out what the answer is. I mean, I don't know what each specific person's reason is for taking a knee. I don't know what their causes are, and I feel like that, maybe their time could be spent by actually trying to change these things that they're wanting to change instead of just, doing it and getting a headline and going on from there.
They always kind of show the bad side of NFL players. I think the only good thing you've heard, I know they all have different charities, and like we've heard a lot about J.J. Watt's charity, where he helped, his town and stuff. But besides that, you don't really hear about the
well, I thought it was kind of cool that they showed Deshaun Watson, and he gave his first, I don't know if it was first game check, but his last game check, whichever one that was, to the cafeteria workers that lost everything in the hurricane.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that type of thing got as much headlines as, the protest, then we would probably be in a different ballgame.
People would be as angry. I wouldn't have, someone saying, well, this is stupid. We shouldn't watch football ever again.
Right. and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Jerry about people's personal lives.
Yes.
It's really hard for us to understand what it's like to be on that stage, to make all of that money, to have those pressures, and who knows how we would respond. I try to put myself into people's shoes, and I'm not sure that we can ever fully understand their role. So, I mean, if you can't understand it and you can't put yourself in there, how can you judge it so harshly? You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so if we can't really judge it, and they're not doing anything to hurt anybody around them, they're not doing anything to hurt their community, and they're a good player on and off the field, then, I mean, I don't see the harm. I mean, it's just putting a black eye on something that probably shouldn't, because, like I said, Deshaun Watson's there giving his game check away, and nobody's talking about it.
I think my stance on it is, they can do what they want, but at the same time, it just kills me when I see people sit down for the anthem.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know it's their right, and I stand for that right, but I think a majority of people I talk to is that way. But again, like you said, until we understand, like, I'm not in their shoes. I don't know exactly.
I saw an interesting thing from an Army Ranger who was talking about Pat Tillman, and he said if Pat Tillman was out there, he would be taking a knee with the rest of his teammates. I found that to be pretty interesting, but if you were in that position, and all of your teammates wanted to go one way, and maybe you saw it a different way, like Mr. Villanueva, would you still stand up, or would you risk alienating yourself from the rest of the team by doing that?
So that's a really good point, because at one part, you're the team is a machine. You're a part of that machine. You don't want, either way to go.
Right.
But that video of Villanueva, that's a pretty powerful, sports, image on Sunday. People talk about all the bad stuff. That was that was really good. That was cool.
But it kind of got overshadowed because he did take that stand, and he did have the guts to do that. But then he kind of came out and apologized for it and said he shouldn't have. Yeah, and so I feel like that kind of overshadows it. So I feel like people should put themselves in that position instead of just saying, I'm never watching the NFL again. And it's easy to say, oh, I would have stood up. But if you really think about it, and you go out there and you sweat with these dudes, you bleed with these dudes, you hear their backstory, what they have going on in their personal lives and all that stuff, and you really become that machine, and you're kind of a cog or wheel in that, you really have to take into strong consideration, do I really want to sit down and risk alienating myself? And when the time comes, is that guy beside me going to have my back ultimately? I've kind of always been the person that I did what I thought was right regardless, and I probably would have done the same thing even with the whatever ramifications happened. But that's easy for me to say here behind this microphone in Winchester, Kentucky, making not even in a year, not even what they're making in a game. So it's easy for me to say, but I just feel like people should put themselves in those shoes and really trying to understand it. And perhaps instead of just putting a microphone in these players' face and talking about them sitting down, maybe everybody should ask, why did you do it? And what do you hope to accomplish, and how are we going to accomplish this? Because, nobody asks those questions. They want the clickbait. They want,
Yeah.
You know, Budweiser leaving the NFL. That's what everybody wants, and it's just a sad state of affairs all around. So.
Yeah, people love kick their corn when they're down. We'll talk a little bit. We got another story about that later on. But I was just talking about disrespect and stuff, and this is kind of going to go against what I was saying earlier. I kind of liked Odell Beckham's celebration in the end zone.
I didn't see it. I didn't see it.
He went like a dog and hiked his leg and acted like he was peeing in the end zone. I love wide receiver celebrations, but it's something that.
So what you're saying is you didn't like it, or
no,
you did?
I did like it.
You did like it.
And some of the things I've read, I don't know if it's true. I haven't really.
So
read
why did he
on
do
what
this?
said.
What was his purpose?
That's kind of the thing. No one's like. There's been different takes on it. One's that it was a response to Donald Trump saying "fire the sons of bitches," and he was trying to be a dog. But then someone said, "Don't really think about it into that," because he probably didn't, do it like that. It's just him being him, but it also cost a penalty on his team.
Don't you miss T.O.?
Yeah,
when you see stuff like that.
Yeah.
He had the best celebrations, man. Nobody could.
Ripping down the banners and stuff.
So, kind of segueing away from that, was there any surprises or takeaways from this week in the NFL that you had in mind?
The Patriots' defense
is awful.
I'm kind of wondering when they're going to come alive.
Yeah, they have to.
Totally, yeah.
They have to.
And that being said, the Panthers are my biggest. That's my biggest surprise because I took like 4 Panthers players in this draft. Yeah. My fantasy team.
See, I learned. I kind of learned to get away from that because of last year and taking a bunch of Saints players. I had Ingram, Fleener, Cooks, and Michael Thomas last year, and so I was literally living and dying with the Saints. And even this year, in fantasy, I saw that Willie Snead was available, and I already have Michael Thomas, and so I was like, man, I really want Willie Snead, but I don't want to go back down that road again. So I feel your pain there. I think that it's been really surprising for me too. I picked them up because they're available in fantasy, and I saw that they had pretty favorable matchups over the next couple weeks with the Panthers and the Jets, especially the Jets. But I feel like they have to turn around just because Belichick is such a defensive master. I saw a documentary on the game-winning play against the Seahawks, and it was a play that they had in their playbook all year long, and they had never ran it before. And for whatever reason, Belichick saw that as an opportunity and kind of predicted what was going to happen and ran that play at that particular point. So I feel like they have to get it together at some point. But
I'm less concerned about them as about the Panthers because this kind of bleeds over from last year. So.
Yeah. Well, we've talked.
If it's just where he didn't play in the preseason, Cam Newton didn't, or could still be hurt.
And we were talking about the sloppiness of the whole league right now, and I heard Herm Edwards talk about how it's mainly how they took contact out of practices now, like the players just aren't getting the same work that they used to. So, do you think that there's any merit to that, and that could be why it's so sloppy of late?
Maybe for the team as a whole, but as far as like
Newton himself.
Yeah, Newton himself. No, I don't think. I think it's like everything I've been reading said it's a lot to do with his throwing motion and his shoulder, and it's getting better. But obviously last week wasn't very good.
We talked about it before. I think he just came back too early.
Yeah.
But like you said, last year wasn't that great either, and so. Kelvin Benjamin's first year was awesome, and now nobody's been able to recapture that, and he lost Greg Olsen for the year, and so I'm not really sure what's next for the Panthers. And that division is kind of it looks like it's going to be owned by the Falcons anyway. Even though the Buccaneers are kind of on the upswing, I'm not sure that they have the firepower to beat the Falcons.
Yeah.
So
we're talking about an easy win for the Patriots. Against the Jets. Josh McCown had a pretty good game last week. I had to look up the stats to make sure I was right on it. 18 for 23, 250 yards, 80% completion, 126 quarterback rating.
Who'd they play, though?
The Dolphins.
The Dolphins?
Yeah.
The Dolphins are pretty bad, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. What about the...
Josh McCown, let me...
What about the Packers losing like half their running back core last night? I mean, they haven't really had a good running game since Eddie Lacy had that one really good year, and now he's kind of
wasn't like super consistent either.
Right.
I think it had a slow start, maybe, or was it slow? I can't remember.
Yeah.
But it really wasn't, because I picked him up that year in fantasy. There was like, it was either really good or really bad, and it was like, he did better when I benched him. You know how it goes.
Yeah, I know how that goes. So how's fantasy life treating you?
Pretty bad. 0-3. Probably going 0-4. The guy I'm going against this week scored 150 points last week in our league, so it's the most anybody scored yet, but you never know.
Right, yeah.
I'm starting Phillip Rivers this week, so.
Could be bonkers.
Yeah.
They play Eagles, right?
I think so.
I think that's right. I think they play the Eagles at home.
The week Cam Newton does do good. We're talking about him, so.
I don't know, man. It's up in New England. I think the Patriots are going to be aware of the issues that he's having. I think that a lot of people probably are whispering and murmuring that he probably came back too soon and he wasn't ready. And I think people will catch up on that, and they'll probably have some type of game plan that makes his life pretty miserable, if I had to guess.
His speed's not up to like what it usually is. He's got McCaffrey to dump the ball off too, doing screens too. That's good, but not on him. So I mean,
he's kind of getting on trial by fire there.
Yeah. You know, who would you think would be rookie of the year at this point? Watson, or should you put McCaffrey up there?
I don't know.
So I was thinking about that. Maybe even Kaiser could be in the conversation, being on the Browns and not being dead yet.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I would say that Deshaun Watson's probably going to continue to impress and kind of build and get better and better. I feel like that if Cam Newton was healthy, he could probably do kind of the same kind of things that Watson did against the Patriots last week. But I don't feel like he's healthy. But I feel like that quarterback's always going to have the leg up on everybody else, especially since how long has it been since there was a quarterback that won Rookie of the Year?
I'm not sure.
It's probably been a while. Because
RG3 won Rookie of the Year.
God, that seems like a lifetime ago.
Maybe that was the last one. I can't remember it, so I may be wrong.
Oh. I saw where he was tweeting the other day about not having a job and having a win with the Browns. I think he was like one of the last quarterbacks to win with the Browns before. Kaiser got a win this year, didn't he?
Not yet. But maybe this
they're
weekend.
0-3. Never mind.
Yeah, maybe this weekend they play the
sorry to pour salt.
Bengals.
Sorry to pour salt in your wound. I don't really pay attention to the Browns. So. The only time I pay attention to the Browns is see who they're playing. That way I know if I want to grab their defense in fantasy or play them in DraftKings. So.
And the Bengals defense would probably be a good play this week.
I feel like my team's finally. I see a little bit of light with my fantasy team. I get Doug Martin back next week, and I play the team that you're talking about that scored the most points. And I probably could have beat them because I had points on my bench last week with Chris Thompson and Chris Hogan. So if I'd had those guys in, I scored 120 or 30. And I had a lot of 30 or 40 points on the bench, so definitely would have been interesting. But I've got a 3-0 opponent this week, and interested to see how it goes because I have to plug Chris Thompson in that flex spot until Doug Martin gets back. And then I'm sure you saw that I traded for David Johnson, which may end up screwing me.
Yeah, if they leave him out the rest of the season.
I don't think they'll leave him out the rest of the season. Gamble. I think he's probably going to come back.
I think it just depends on where they're at by then. I mean, obviously.
You really think so? I don't think it's the same as a quarterback. I feel like that those type of guys have to get their work in, or roll into the next season. They might be pretty rusty, and it might not be
good,
the same. All right. Well, we've pretty much NFL'd it to death. So, what's up next?
All right. We're talking about kicking people when they're down. Let's talk about Rick Pitino of Louisville. What's your take on it? Let's start because you're not a huge Kentucky fan. You're probably not a Kentucky fan at all. So
I'm not really.
You probably have the best kind of perspective about this.
I'm not really a college sports fan at all. I probably have some pretty controversial takes on it because I think that this type of stuff goes on everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't think that Kentucky or North Carolina or anyone is exempt from it. I just think it's a matter of who gets caught and who doesn't. And I've had the opinion that the shoe companies for many, many years have kind of been the driving force of where people go to, and it's something that I've been, I wouldn't say in arguments for, but it's definitely an opinion that I've probably been criticized for. But, you know, kind of being a reformed sneakerhead at this point, because I'm old and have kids and I can't afford them anymore. But if it was me that had the scholarship opportunities, the sneaker companies would definitely play a big role. And, you know, places like Kentucky get Kobe's or LeBron's, anything Nike that are exclusives that nobody else is getting their hands on. And these guys got stacks and stacks and stacks of shoes. Like the Harrison twins, one year I watched them, when I was watching them play, it seemed like they had a different pair of Kobe's on every night, and that's, you know, $200 to $250 pair of shoes every single night. And, you know, North Carolina's got Jordan exclusives that nobody else gets their hands on. Oregon's got Nike exclusive, Jordan exclusives, whatever they want. So I feel like the shoe companies are a big driving force behind a lot of decisions in college basketball. So I found it very interesting that Adidas was in there. Adidas has kind of been a really obscure company within not only NBA but college for several years. I would say since, you know, with the rise of Derrick Rose, I think their shoes were doing pretty good. And then when he got hurt, I kind of derailed anything that he had. I'm sure it's probably still does pretty good in the soccer communities and stuff like that. They seem to be pretty prominent when you turn on the TV and you see that. But as far as in basketball, you know, Adidas is really, I don't see a lot of them. I don't see a lot of signature shoes. There's not a lot of big name top tier stars that are wearing them anymore.
Yeah.
And so I found it very interesting that they're the ones that were kind of giving this guy money, and with the caveat that he had to choose to wear them in the NBA. So, you know, there's nothing that, from what I read, it went pretty deep. It named several different basketball programs, and, you know, Louisville's obviously the one getting the most attention around here. I don't know if it's because, you know, the UK-Louisville rivalry or not.
They had the wiretap on them at the hotel room, too. I think that's the big thing. And they announced the other schools first, and then they kept the Louisville one kind of private till their conference.
But they don't.
Because they had more on them.
The initial article that I read, and like you said, I'm not a huge college basketball fan, so I don't read a whole lot of stuff about it. But the initial article that I read basically said that everybody had some type of paper trail except for Louisville, though, right? The only thing that Louisville had.
Well, I think so. They don't have. I can't remember how it goes, but I know they had a wire there. They'd been wiretapping an assistant coach, and they got him on tape saying, you know, we got to be careful with this because we're already on probation.
So, and it was pertaining to the Adidas thing or
Adidas
something else.
payment, yeah.
So Adidas offered $100,000 for this kid
to
go to Louisville and then wear Adidas past his Louisville career.
I'm not sure if it's like.
No, that was a caveat. I'm for sure that's part of it.
I know that a lot of it had to do with going to different financial advisors too, and I think they had money in with Adidas. Maybe I'm not, because a lot of it hasn't came out yet. Cause it's
right.
Yeah, that's why they're still doing subpoenas on other schools.
Right, but how? So is the Patino? He's not technically fired, right?
Well, his contract said he's entitled to a 10-day notice before he's fired.
Gotcha.
And I think that's why they went ahead and said he's on unpaid leave. They would have announced the interim coach.
I saw that, Paget got announced as the interim coach. So they fired him because of all the other problems surrounding Louisville and kind of a lack of administrative control, or?
Yeah, I think it had to have been the final straw. He should have been fired. You know, I wouldn't say that.
Well, you told me the president wanted him fired several times, right? And the athletic director.
I think that's what allegedly Tom Jurek was fired because he wasn't, he wouldn't fire Patino.
Right. So what's next for Louisville? I saw a lot of people saying death penalty.
Everything I've read and listened to, people aren't believing they'll get the death penalty, but if they do, imagine. You know, the young center's already having all these financial problems.
Yeah.
A whole year, maybe 2 years without basketball, like Louisville basketball, it's just, you know.
So if they give them that, they won't be playing at all? Because I was under the impression, I guess if they got the death penalty, they wouldn't be playing at all. But if they got some type of like postseason ban, they could still play the regular season.
I don't see any situation where they won't get a postseason ban.
Yeah,
like
they already
on probation.
They already had to give up a lot of those wins and stuff from their seasons where they're really good.
They're going to take the banner down, I'm sure, still, if they hadn't already.
Yikes.
Yeah, so I mean, but Pitino's legacy it's a, I was a small kid whenever Pitino coached at Kentucky. I don't remember, a lot of the coaching part of, or him being at Kentucky. I remember a lot of the different players and stuff, but I was just, he played there until I was like 7 maybe. So I was pretty young, 1997. But I know a lot of people around here, like, they loved him even after he left. It's just a whole complicated.
Well, how do you not love a guy that wins multiple championships for you?
I won one championship.
Just one?
Yeah.
Tubby won the other one,
yeah.
But it was still Rick Pitino's team.
People say that, but
I sent you that meme that said somebody else that needs to win. I already saw that that one of their people that were committed already pulled out of that uncommitted.
Yeah, I think the whole class of 2018.
They all did, and that was supposedly their best class to date, right?
Or so.
On paper at least.
This year or next year.
But I think the bottom line is it didn't seem like Pitino had much control. I don't know if he just didn't care anymore or what, but all these crazy stories that came out, it feels like that probably a lot of this stuff is going on in college basketball, and it's just a matter of who keeps it under wraps the best. That's kind of the take that I get.
It's hard to keep up with, like he's probably arguably the second best coach in the NCAA behind Coach K. But as far as programs, he's going against Coach K at Duke, Bill Self at Kansas, and Kentucky. They're always getting the top recruits.
Right.
And you got to be competitive, and I'm sure there's a whole lot of pressure to that.
Yeah.
And I think the prostitution stuff, he may not have known that exactly happened, but I'm sure that he said, "Do what you got to do." You know what I'm saying? Like we've all been there, like at work, do what you got to do, get it done.
Yeah.
I'm sure that happened there.
I don't know.
It happened there too.
I just hope that something more goes into kind of. I hate to say it because I love sneakers so much, but I hope a lot more goes into investigating these sneaker brands and their involvement with it all, because a lot of these kids from AAU on are wearing the same type of sneakers. They're going to schools. I've seen people say they're not going to Louisville because of Adidas before. So, I feel like it plays a really big role in it. And a lot of these kids, after they go and play, and they may not have moved on to the NBA or whatever, they're selling those sneakers on eBay. You can get on there right now and pull up, game worn.
They just can't sell it while they're in school.
Yeah. But who could prevent them from, I wear size 13 and I'm in a dorm with whoever, and how can they possibly know if I sell somebody in my dorm a pair of sneakers for $300 or $400? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I'm sure at Kentucky, if something like that was to happen, they would know about it.
Well, they all live together, right?
Well, that too. Coach Cal's like probably one of the scrutinized coaches like ever. I'm sure the NCAA has him under the microscope. Has had him under the microscope since a second incident, since the second vacated Final Four. I'm sure that I'm not saying that nothing's going to come out in the future of Kentucky, but I'll be very surprised if it does, something like that.
So you're thinking that they're throwing them off the top of dorms if they find out too much information? That's what you're saying?
I don't think that stuff goes. Well, I'm sure it does, but more low key, like you were saying, like a trade with someone else. But I
find it very difficult to believe, and I feel like that you'd be very naive not to think that some of this stuff doesn't go on with as much money as changing hands.
Funnels through the NCAA. Yeah. That's what I think, that a lot of it. I don't think it should be sneaker companies that should be, but I'll have a counter to this because I got another part about it. But I don't think they should be regulated and investigated. I think the NCAA should just let kids make money on their own name. But at the same time,
I just think that
the door to credit, they're going to go after these kids and take advantage of them.
Right.
These big companies. And I can see that side of it. And that's kind of where maybe these kids need an agent, or, I'm not too sure what safeguard would be to keep them from.
Right. I just think that I didn't necessarily mean to go after the sneaker companies by themselves. I just feel like that may be the end to figure out exactly what's going on. Kind of like Adidas was in this instance. Like, if you follow the money, so to speak, then you kind of figure out a little bit more about what's going on. So
yeah, I mean, I've never been a Rick Pitino fan, and whenever all this stuff came out Tuesday, Wednesday morning, I knew it was going to happen because I was like reading all the reports and stuff. So
do you feel like he's kind of like Larry Brown, and he'll just get a coaching job somewhere else at some point?
Probably the biggest ego of any coach. I mean, look at every time he's been in trouble for something, he'll say, you know, talking about grieving over 9/11 or being like, this was on the anniversary of Jimmy V's death or something like that. Like he's never owned up to anything he's done wrong.
Right.
And you know, he's just, I don't know, he's a sleazeball, I think. I mean, I'm going to really miss the Kentucky-Louisville rivalry.
So you think this puts a nail in the coffin because of the amount of people that have already drawn out of the class? How long will it be before they rebuild to compete with Kentucky?
It shouldn't be too long.
As long as they don't get the death penalty,
Depends on their sanctions because they're a big name right next to Kentucky. So it's still a good job.
Yeah.
I mean, they won a national championship. Well, I don't know if it counts anymore. But
I saw a lot of rejoicing and stuff online, but like you said, I think it just hurts the state of Kentucky because you got the giant Yum Center there, like you're talking about, and you know, I can't see.
Who else is going to pay for it? The state.
No, but what I'm saying is I can't see the tension and everything going into the Kentucky-Louisville game this year. Now that there's no Pitino. Now that we kind of know what we know now, even if they don't get sanctions, that and they're allowed to play, I don't know where the game is this year. I don't know if it's at Rupp or.
If they do get the death penalty, hopefully they'll bring back that Kentucky-Indiana game. Non-conference. I like those too. Yeah. I went to my mom's house after the press conference, and she was talking about how sad it was, and he really energized the whole fan base when he was here at Kentucky. But
right.
To me, I saw it the other way. I remember after Pitino left, my dad went out, bought a Celtics hat.
Yeah.
People then when he went to Louisville, he wasn't mad. He was like, "Well, I root for Louisville whenever they're not playing Kentucky."
Right.
I've never been that type of person.
Yeah.
I was like, on one hand, I think he's a pretty bad person, probably one of the greatest coaches in basketball history. But, it's a weird legacy.
Yeah.
Strange story, but. Including Pitino, I kind of wonder about Arizona. They're ranked #1 this year, and Sean Miller's team, like some of his assistants too, were implicated in it. And I kind of wonder, what's going to be next because they've just talked about Pitino. They haven't talked.
I know
about
that's the weird part, and I don't know
Auburn,
if it's.
They haven't talked about Auburn yet or Arizona. They haven't talked about any other.
There was some Central, wasn't it like Iowa or Iowa State or somebody in the Central United States too that was a part of it.
I'm not sure. I don't know how true it is, but they said close. I can't remember exactly how the story goes, so I'm not going to really talk about it. But I can't remember the other schools on top of that. I remember Arizona and Auburn.
Yeah, once again, they've only talked about Pitino, so it's hard to get a read on everybody else because I've paid attention even on Twitter, and I haven't seen anything other than Pitino's going.
Brooks, this is his second, NCAA fraction.
Right.
It will be one. I mean. But it's kind of, I wonder if this is just the start of the story. It's just,
I'd say it is.
Yeah.
I would say that it is. I'd say it goes as deep as they want to look, personally.
I'm for sure going to miss, rooting against Rick Pitino every year.
It is what it is, man. Yeah. Maybe he'll go somewhere else, and then UK can have a layup game against whatever school he plays at.
But David Pageant, that took over for him, he was comes from that Pitino regime.
Right.
You're trying to get rid of the regime, but you're taking somebody that used to be on that, I don't know if he was there when the Katina Powell, the prostitution stuff was going on, but,
He was at IUP. I heard his resume, and I think he might have been in IUPUI as an assistant.
He was like 2014 coaching, wasn't he, or assistant, or 2012 maybe? I can't remember when it was, but he was assistant for a short while.
He was like a strength and conditioning coach, and then he went to IUPUI to be an assistant coach, and then he came back to be an assistant coach at Louisville. So
Rick's coaching tree, it's pretty impressive. You see guys like Mick Cronin and Billy Donovan. I'm sure there's a whole lot more on this.
Right.
Because all these guys that went unsuccessful, like Billy Donovan won 2 titles, Tubby Smith won 1. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Hopefully they just learned from his coaching and not from all the other stuff.
Let's move on. We'll segue into the NBA. You know, there was a joke the other day, going back to Tina, I can't remember who was it. Adrian Wojnarowski made the tweet about he's like, for years Rick's been trying to see what his interest would be in the NBA,
right,
and it's still 0.
Yeah.
But going to the NBA, last week we talked a little bit about the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Right.
Some big news happened since then. You kind of want to talk about it?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously most people probably know that Melo is now with OKC. You know, I think it's great. We talked about kind of our path to really supporting Russ and kind of what he's doing, and then, you know, obviously with Paul George, I've always been a pretty big fan, and I'll never forget watching that Team USA game where he broke his leg, and I've always really rooted for him since then. I think he's a really underrated player that was kind of in obscurity up there
in the small market.
In Indiana. And so I was really happy when they got together, and I think Melo's been a guy that's really caught a bad rap, and maybe by going out to OKC he'll be more embraced than kind of vilified like he was in New York, and, you know, maybe they're able to put it all together. Obviously we talked about last week with the different problems that they're going to face, and you know, defense, I feel like, especially on the inside, is going to be a big deal to OKC, and one of the pieces that they had to give up was Kander. So, I mean,
yeah, Kander doesn't give you too much on defense. Steve Adams is still he's
right,
still
but you still got a big body down there that can get rebounds and affect the lane to the rim, and I feel like that makes a big difference because he was so much bigger than Steven Adams. To me, Steven Adams is more of like a hustle guy. And I'd say that he could probably extend a guard a 4 or maybe even a 3 in some situations. And he's going to be that guy that comes and crashes the board. And with Kanter kind of clogging up the middle, you know, I feel like that kind of freed him up to do a little bit more of that. So now, you know, he's going to be kind of edit down there alone. They did get Patrick Patterson, though, so that's a little bit of help. But obviously, I would say with OKC, defense is probably going to be a pretty big problem with them, and also their bench. You know, they've had to give up so many of their bench players and their role players to accommodate for the rest of the team to come over there. So it's going to be interesting to see how they put it all together. I'm definitely going to be rooting for them. And then, you know, obviously we were talking about Russ signing his contract today, a 5-year extension that's been sitting around for months, and he just decides to sign it on Katie's birthday. But I feel like that it really it hopefully sets a precedent, and it shows his loyalty to OKC and the fans. And I feel like that they had a little bit of momentum already running their way, and now with him signing that contract, I feel like it's going to give fans a lot of faith to go out there and buy those season tickets moving forward. And hopefully, you know, Russ and Melo both see that, or I'm sorry, George and Melo both see that, and they want to invest in the team as well. Because basically, the way that I look at it, I'm not sure that Houston's ever going to be able to put it together. They just always kind of have a choke factor to me. So you know, obviously the Warriors are still the team to beat, but I feel like that this puts OKC into maybe the category of one injury or something like that, and they're right there winning the West.
Yeah, and I think they're second right now. Some people would say like fifth or something, but I think they're right behind the Warriors probably.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at least in the West.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't see anybody else competing with them.
Arguable with the Celtics and Cavs, but I still think that, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we can talk about the Cavs a little bit, but, you know, I really feel like that it's a good thing for Oklahoma City because losing Durant was so devastating. I really feel like the way that he went about everything that he did was really shady, especially for a place that has embraced and only known, you know, kind of the Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook show. And for him to kind of turn his back on that whole aspect of it. I feel like everything is kind of his worst nightmare, like we were talking about with his Twitter scandal and all that stuff going on. I feel like it just further puts a black eye on the whole situation and what everybody's saying about him having to go to the Warriors and win and stuff like that. Now you're having Oklahoma City kind of organically put this together because they didn't go out and sign these guys or recruit them in the offseason or have other people talk to them. They did this all organically and made trades and made moves that they thought was best for their organization. And I just think that it goes to show you once again the way that the Warriors did everything. I don't agree with. I'm sure that they all have their own reasoning, but I'm really happy for Oklahoma City, and I hope that they're able to put it all together. I feel like that they've got a lot of moving parts right now, and it may take them a while to kind of get going.
Yeah.
But
they got 3 really good isolation shooters. It's going to be there's going to be some growing pains, I think, at first. But
right.
Paul George, we've never seen him besides the Olympics play with anybody besides Lance Stevenson.
Yeah.
It was real good, so it's kind of exciting
for sure
to see what his potential could be.
For sure. Yeah. And everybody talks about Russ's selfishness, so to speak, but they said the same things about Kobe. But the difference between Russ and Kobe is that last year Russ averaged 10 assists a game. And to me, I don't know how you call in somebody selfish when they're averaging that many assists a game, because obviously it does a lot of work to get that many assists, and that was with players that weren't that great. And now he's got 2 guys that kind of spot up, and so he can move around and grab the attention and then kick the ball off to either one of those guys, and they should be able to hit some things. And I feel like Paul George is still young enough that he can drive to the basket and create some opportunities for not only Russ but also Melo spotting up, because I really feel like that's Melo's position now as a spot-up shooter. I think he shot his highest percentage from three-point last year, so really exciting things. And you mentioned Cleveland and Boston. Obviously we'd be remiss without talking about Dwayne Wade going to Cleveland, and I'm not sure how much better it makes them. Isaiah Thomas is coming off an injury. They got Derrick Rose, who he hasn't been Derrick Rose for a long time now. And then you kind of had LeBron, who seems to be fading, especially towards the end of the year. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what's next for them. Boston's so young, and I feel like that they probably have more drive than Cleveland does at this point, because a lot of the guys in Cleveland got a lot older. Everybody talked about everything that they added and stuff like that. Other than Isaiah Thomas, all those guys are pretty old. And, you got Boston over there with Hayward and Kyrie Irving and Al Horford, who's not that old either. And nobody ever talks about Al Horford, and he was a really good player. So, I feel like it's definitely very interesting, and I feel like Boston's going to give them a run for their money, and I'll be rooting for Boston now, when LeBron left and it created the vacuum in Cleveland, I really started watching Kyrie Irving. I got NBA League Pass that year that Kyrie Irving was drafted.
You should just watch Fox Sports Net and watch them lose every game.
Well, I did.
The Reds aren't on.
I did, but I got it because I wanted to I really felt like it was Kobe's end of his career. And I believe, I'm not really sure of my timelines. I could be telling you wrong. But a lot of the times Kobe was sitting out. It was kind of when his injuries were happening. And so I was still watching Cleveland. And we were doing NBA fantasy at that point too. And I really was drawn to Kyrie's game. And then, of course, the Uncle Drew commercials came out, and that brought him even more popularity. And, I feel like that LeBron is kind of like I don't know, he's like a cancer that makes everybody feel good for a couple years. They win, and then the next thing you know, he's breaking up teams. I just feel like that he's another guy that nobody ever wants to say anything bad about him ever. Meanwhile, you watch him play, and he kind of belittles teammates and stuff like Jordan and them did, and you're like, oh, well, he might be a pretty good leader, but then you see him get bumped or something in the game, and he falls down like he's dead, and it's just he's not the type of guy that I would want leading the team. And I understand kind of where Kyrie's coming from, especially watching that series. And, at the biggest moments, LeBron kicked the ball to what's the shooter's name? The dude that
J.R. Smith?
No, the white guy.
Dellavedova?
No, Dellavedova didn't play for Cleveland last year. The dude that came from the Hawks.
Kyle Korver.
Kyle Korver, and he was like 1 for 1,000 in the series, and the series is on the line, and where it's just 2-1 at this point. Cavs can tie the series, and he's got the ball in his hands to tie the game, and he kicks it out to Kyle Korver.
Yeah. At the same time, Kyle Korver I think he led the NBA. Might be wrong in this, like 3-point percentage or something the year before. I think.
Would Jordan have done it?
No.
Would Kobe have done it?
No.
6'8", and you're large. Drive the freaking ball to the basket and get fouled or score the hoop and tie the series. I mean, I just feel like that LeBron's that guy that he's got a shelf life everywhere he goes. It's only a couple years, and then the next thing you know, it's downhill.
I wonder where he goes next.
Who cares?
Says the Lakers, but
I don't think.
Why would they want him?
I'm not really sure that.
I know why they'd want him.
Right.
With Lonzo Ball there, and they're trying to grow a team.
This might be I think that the only thing that has kept LeBron relevant the last couple of years has been, number one, that they're winning titles, and I think a lot of that kind of rests on the shoulders of Kyrie and Kevin Love, because especially, when they won the championship against the Warriors, that was the Kyrie show, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think that this is going to bring into question LeBron's relevance, because I'm not sure how good they're going to be. I'm not sure that he's the perennial MVP player that he was before, and I think it's going to be one of those things where this might be the end of his relevance, and he might be championship chasing from now, like you said.
Well, since he's been like in MVP level, there really hasn't been a real contender against him, like another Eastern team besides like the Celtics teams, like from 10 years ago, those Celtics teams.
Yeah.
Those are really good teams. Besides that, I can think of any Eastern teams that really gave him a good run. I mean, maybe like that one year the Bulls kind of did.
But he hasn't really won without championship chasing either. He hasn't won anything organically. So if he was able to somehow put this team together in Cleveland and make it work this year, I never was a LeBron fan when he came in the NBA. I thought he was a guy that they're putting on the front of Sports Illustrated, calling him the chosen one before he played a game in the NBA. And I just never got behind him. I don't like being force-fed that stuff. I feel like people force-feed you all the time, tell you that he's the greatest of all time. They talk about how great he is, and nobody ever talks about his flaws, and that really bothers me. And so he left. I'm like, see, I was telling you guys. He went, and obviously at least I rooted against him with the Heat. He wins his championships, and then he writes the letter, and he comes back to Cleveland. And, granted, Cleveland was building a pretty good team at that point in time.
Yeah.
But he really won me over with that. And, they go on to win the championship. Kyrie shines. He hits the game-winning shot. It's beautiful. I mean, I celebrated. I was happy for Cleveland. And it's weird for me to root for a LeBron James team, but the Warriors made it easy for me, because I actually dislike the Warriors more than even the Cavs now with LeBron James. Even this year, if it was the Warriors and the Cavs, I'd still be rooting for the Cavs.
Yeah.
But, once again, they don't win, and the team kind of implodes, and who knows what was said, but I saw a lot of moments where he was kind of little brothering Kyrie or whoever else it was, and a lot of those times he would be driving to the basket and he wouldn't be finishing and all this stuff. There's so many missed opportunities down the stretch of those games, and I really felt like it rests on his shoulders once again, kicking the ball to Kyle Korver and not finishing the ball at the hoop and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, I just feel like he has a shelf life, and I feel like he's championship chased to this point. And if he leaves Cleveland now after this season, I don't really know what his legacy is. I mean,
it'd be interesting to see. I mean, reports are wants to go to the Lakers, but
that's so weird after the whole offseason, him and Lonzo Ball's dad going back and forth and all that stuff. That's just weird. Now all of a sudden you want to be a Laker.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the Lakers have the pieces. It's a long-term team. I think that they've got the pieces to make it in the long term, but why would he leave Cleveland, who has more now players, towards the end of his career to go with the Lakers? Him going to the Lakers isn't going to make them beat the Warriors. It's not going to make them beat.
I don't think he'd fit in because he'd have to go in and be boss man. He wouldn't be able to be boss man.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, I don't think he would be, but I mean, I could be wrong. They might. I mean, he is probably the best basketball players this age. Why wouldn't they want him?
Right.
Kind of could jeopardize your long-term plan, like you said. They're building for the future.
He's definitely.
He's
Definitely. I would say, probably the best small forward, obviously statistically and everything else, maybe ever. But he's not the best ever.
Yeah.
I still think Jordan's the best, Kobe's second best, and I don't think LeBron's in that conversation yet because of his antics and everything that he's had to do. And now you've got LeBron outside of the basketball court getting so political and being weird, and it's kind of, it just takes even more away from for me.
Making movies for that damn Amy Schumer.
That's not what I was talking about, but I was talking about kind of the presidential run and refusing to stay at the Trump hotels, and now being so political. The reason we watch sports is to escape from bullcrap like that. I don't want to hear you preach.
But ever. Chris Paul said that when the NBA season starts, that they're going to kneel too.
It's a rule; they're not allowed to.
Yeah.
So. Unless they change that rule, I don't know what the penalty is. But
Chris Paul can afford to get that. He's a raucous now.
Speaking of another choke artist, Chris Paul. Yeah.
I kind of wonder. I'm kind of excited to see the Rockets play. I'm not a Rockets fan, never been, but I mean, those two players, they're both really good. James Harden's coming into his own as a passer, as a good defensive player, and then. And they kind of add Chris Paul. I think he played really good, at point. But when James Harden played point, he's really good. And then you gotta add Chris Paul. Chris Paul is good too, but
Chris Paul ruined my life whenever he was traded to the Lakers, and then they redacted that trade, and they ended up having to pay Steve Nash all that money, and he never even really played a full season there. And the Clippers go on to be kind of the first super team, and he never does anything ever with them in the playoffs or anything.
Yeah.
And I think it's just going to be the same deal in Houston. I mean, it might have been different if they got Carmelo, but that time's
fast. They had
fast.
Carmelo, it's a completely different conversation. But I don't know how well they'll mesh together. I mean, Harden. I don't think he needed another guard with him. I mean,
they both need to touch the ball a whole lot.
Yeah. People say the same thing about the Thunder, but I mean, I think that they have better chance to mesh.
Right, like we talked about, Melo's more becoming a spot up shooter. I don't think he needs to touch the ball as much as he used to. So. And
he did as well as the Olympics when he was third man in the Olympics.
Right.
I mean, that's I don't know. Guess we'll have to see, but I'm excited.
Yeah, but I think it gives us a lot to talk about, because for me at this point in my life, for whatever reason, I really enjoy the NBA, and I really kind of got burned out on it when I was doing the fantasy and watching the league pass and stuff. And then I try to enjoy as much as Kobe leaving as possible. He had the fantastic game to end his career, and then I got to roll that into the Cavs winning a championship. But I just didn't enjoy the NBA last year because of the whole Kevin Durant thing, and I'm hoping that this year it kind of reopens the door and reinvigorates me personally for the NBA, and I'm really interested to see the way it plays out, and I think it gives us a lot to talk about for sure. So
yeah,
should be exciting.
Yeah, pretty exciting.
We got next.
We'll move to last Saturday's the Bellator fight.
Gotcha. So you said you made notes. I'm really proud. Did you?
I didn't watch the whole thing.
You didn't watch it?
No. Well, I got to Big Country's fight and didn't make it through it.
Didn't make it through it. No. So you didn't watch any of the other fights?
I watched the undercard. I watched.
You didn't watch the main card?
No, I didn't.
Oh, come on, man.
Fishing Wednesday, and then they called me into work and all that. I
Gotcha.
Fishing Thursday too.
Yeah. So the Roy Nelson fight, it was interesting. I feel like that Nelson definitely, in my opinion, did enough to win the decision. It wasn't what I thought it would be. He had to go to more of like a takedown fight I guess I could have seen a scenario where that happened if Ayala had hurt him, but it didn't really seem like Ayala had hurt him. It was just more the fact that Nelson couldn't really hurt him, and so he was taking him down and kind of controlling the fight. Which I guess when me and Billy initially talked about it, I think we kind of hit on it a little bit. But yeah, he won. So I predicted that one right, but the next two I did not predict right. So I think I'm going to actually retire, and this is my moment. I'll break the fights down, but I might as well just I broke even now, so I'm like 8-8, and so I'll just go ahead and ride in the sunset because here's why. So you go into the Larkin Daly fight. It was a really entertaining fight. Larkin kind of had the upper hand, and then Daly changed it with one punch. And obviously Daly has that ability. I'm not sure with Daly winning instead of Larkin what Bellator is going to do moving forward, because Daly got beat so bad by McDonald, who's now fighting for the title. Like, I'm not sure how you make that title push for Daly unless they make another fight for him. And he called out MVP, which is undefeated, but he's not really a contender. To me, if I was Bellator, I would try to pit Daly against Korshkov and have a contender waiting for that other fight, because that other fight doesn't happen until January. So you could actually make Daly Korshkov in the meantime, and then have a clear-cut contender, after the Lima McDonald fight, with that one being so far away. I felt like Larkin was doing really good, but just one lapse in judgment, taking the left hook, and it ends the fight. And I mean that's the fight game. That's how it works, especially when you're fighting a guy like Daly who does have that fight-changing ability in one punch. It's not really a common thing. And he ended the fight and put a stamp on it. Larkin's now 0-2 in Bellator. I'm not really sure what they do with him. I feel like that they have to go into full rebuild mode with him and maybe give him a lower-tier guy to try to build him back up. But for me, I'm not sure that I'm convinced if Daly beats MVP that he's the number one contender. I would much rather see the Korshkov-Daly fight and be able to see how that plays out to make a clear-cut contender. And then the main event with Pitbull versus Henderson. It wasn't a very entertaining fight for me. There was moments where they kind of went back and forth, but it was kind of a anticlimactic fight. Watching Benson Henderson for so long in the UFC, I mean, it feels like he's really just a shell of himself. The only time in Bellator that I've seen that I really thought he was like himself was in the later rounds against Michael Chandler. And so I think this puts him to 1-3 in Bellator since he moved over, and the only win came off of a Pitbull's brother actually breaking his leg against his shin. So it's not like he's had a clear and definitive win in Bellator. Granted, he's fought the top of the divisions, but he just wasn't himself, wasn't really putting things together. His movement was weird. There was very few exchanges. The whole second round, he pretty much tried to take Pitbull down with not a lot of action. I didn't feel like Pitbull landed anything definitive either, but he ended up getting the decision win. I heard a lot of people saying that they thought that Henderson actually got robbed with it. I mean, nobody did anything to sway my opinion one way or the other. And so I'm not really sure what you do with those guys either. I feel like you need to go in rebuild mode with Henderson if he continues to fight at this point with his kind of really bad record in Bellator. I would give him a lower ranked guy and just try to rebuild him from there. And with Pitbull, I'm not convinced that he's the number one contender either. I feel like if Henderson won, you can really make the case for him, being that he had such a close fight with Michael Chandler before, and Brent Primus, who's the champion now because of the Michael Chandler injury. He was kind of calling out Pitbull, and I feel like that's just kind of his way of saying I don't want to fight Michael Chandler. So I'm not really sure. I felt so good going into this card, and I felt like it was going to really clear up a lot of things, and if anything, I feel like it really muddied the water. Especially with kind of the controversial decision, the lackluster performance by both fighters in the main event. like I'm not convinced that either one of those guys are ready for a title shot. Obviously not Henderson, but I don't think Pitbull deserves one either. And so I think that you have to give him somebody at the top of the 155-pound division, like kind of like I was saying with Daly and Korshkov, and give him the ability to make his case and put the stamp that he's the next contender in line. So, but this wasn't as fantastic as I thought it would be. You know, they had the Daly finish, but the Nelson Ayala fight was kind of boring at times, and then the main event was really boring to me. So. I wish you could have saw it.
Yeah, I watched the undercard, and it wasn't bad. Like the Landon Pico fight, it was all like that.
Yeah, Pico's the guy that when you came over and watched the pay-per-view, he's the one that got beat. That was so highly touted.
Yeah,
and
the very beginning of the fight.
You know, he's a big time prospect for Bellator. You know, it was a great knockout. I feel like he was taking a lot of shots that he didn't need to take before and leading up to that. He was sloppy at times, over aggressive, and I just hope that they're kind of careful with him. You know, if they're really trying to build him up to be a contender and they think that he's going to be a champion one day, I think that they need to let him fight and let him get experience underneath his belt, because to me, you know, watching that, there was a lot of sloppy moments from him. Yes, he did win with a very impressive knockout, but I'm not sure what the quality of his opponent was. I never seen him fight before, and I feel like that he's just going to have to continue to put on performances like that before they give him like a top tier guy.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to watch all of it, but I went fishing. And I went fishing the next day.
Yeah, I understand.
It's this whole thing, man.
I understand, but I mean, hey.
It's good weather this week.
Right, but you probably wouldn't have ever watched the fights before until we started doing the podcast. So I feel like it's kind of opening doors for you, and you're kind of experiencing new things in it. And I mean, I think it's going to be cool whenever you do, you know, watch the full card and we can talk about it, or maybe even we were able to watch them together, because that's kind of like what me and Billy did in the beginning, you know, kind of shooting off our opinions back and forth to each other. So
yeah, definitely.
What you got next?
Let's talk about the numbers, the pay-per-view numbers.
So and kind of we'll pivot off of that and talk about the Golovkin Canelo numbers as well, because they came out. So, you know, Dana White was talking all this about the numbers being like 6.5 million for the pay-per-view, and they officially came out this week at 4.4, which didn't even top Mayweather versus Pacquiao. So pretty big bummer. I mean, I was expecting more than that. I was excited for MMA and everything that it would bring, and I was pretty shocked that when I saw them only at 4.4 that they didn't even beat, you know, the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight. And then the Triple G Golovkin numbers came in, and they only did 1.3 million. And I really thought that those numbers would be right. I thought that those numbers would be more in line with the 3 or 4 million. And then, you know, obviously the Mayweather versus Conor fight would do more than the Pacquiao Mayweather fight. But I found that very surprising. Somebody said to me that they thought that it had a lot to do with piracy, but it seemed like that they probably shut that down pretty quick.
I don't know. I've been to a bunch of people's houses and they have the streams going on their computer.
Yeah, but I feel like it's different for a fight of that magnitude. Yeah. Maybe not. I don't know.
They'll watch it all grainy, and they're like, you know, it's like, I don't know. I mean,
of course, I would never stoop to those levels.
That's for peasants.
Yeah, I would never do that. I do like to try to. I feel like it's almost like rewarding the UFC or boxing or whoever for putting on these performances and these cards.
That was the Triple G Canelo. That was pretty good.
And so, I mean, you've heard me say it before. Like with the past couple UFCs, I'm not giving them my money for those cards. I mean, I know there's a lot of fans out there that will buy it, but I feel like that our only way to get the UFC to kind of listen to what they're putting out, that we're not that interested, is by not buying it. I mean, I'll watch the highlights of it, I'll read on it, I'll like the tweets, I'll support them any way that I can, but I'm not going to give them my hard-earned money to put on a couple of half-decent fights. I mean, I'm from the days where you looked at the card and every fight was like, oh my gosh, you know. And now you're like, nah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, we're kind of talking, you know, Bellator, they have 184 coming up. It's a lot of the lighter weight guys, so that's not exactly my cup of tea. I'll definitely watch it, and if there's anything, you know, noteworthy, we'll talk about it. But UFC 216, you know, I kind of basically, I guess I do have one more prediction out there. I said that I thought that Tony Ferguson would easily beat Kevin Lee, and that's the main event. And then two more. I had Demetrius Johnson over Ray Borg. I think that's a layup for him. And, you know, the rest of that card is, I mean, there's definitely some guys on there that I'm familiar with who they are, but it's not my guys that I'm going to pay money for. They added
some good betting tips to tell people to go against what you
please go against what I'm saying, because I'm too old school apparently, and I cannot look at things the way that I thought I could. But I mean, you know, Kevin Lee was kind of boosted up into that position to fight Tony Ferguson, and because of Khabib not being able to make weight, and it's for the interim title, Connor's not there. So it's really hard for me. Demetrius Johnson selected Ray Borg by hand to make his, you know, title defense that's going to be a record break. So, I mean, that was a really big bummer for me. And then the only other fight that I would be interested in is Derek Lewis versus Fabricio Werdum. And, you know, I feel like that could be an interesting fight. Derek Lewis is a younger guy, and obviously Fabricio being a past champion, it's really interesting. Just not enough there for me to want to spend my money. If one of our buddies gets it, I'll throw in $10 or whatever to be able to go watch it. But
you gotta save all the money up you can, especially with Charles Freewell's coming back out with
the Dadas. Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, gotta save up that money.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
the black and blue.
But like, you know, the Canelo fight, I mean, that was an $80 fight, and then you had the $100 fight before, and obviously those are big, huge marquee fights that I want to, you know, watch. And, you know, when I see my DirecTV bill, you know, it's the big one, Elizabeth. So it's just really hard for me to cope with spending that type of money on cards that I don't feel like are stacked from top to bottom, and I feel like that they're really kind of just continuing to put out products even though they're not the best in the world. So
yeah, I agree.
What else you got?
Well, one of the last things we talked about, we kind of picked up on it last time, and we were going to talk about it. But the, you know, local deer, you know, the southeastern, eastern part of America, you know, they're kind of going, you know, they're kind of having some issues with the EHD.
Yeah, I said EHA last time, so my bad.
Yeah, so if you want to, do you like kind of want to touch base on?
Yeah, thank goodness it still hasn't affected us. There's only the one deer that I heard about. I did have the chart here, and it's really all around us. If I can find it,
I can send you the map.
I've got it here. But like I said before, there's cases with counties. You know, I see all the way down in Pike County with cases of 458, and then as close to us as 228 on the other side of Menifee County. But like, it doesn't seem like there's any reported in Montgomery County, Bourbon County, Fayette County, and only one in Madison County. It says 2 in Clark County. I don't know if that number has risen or not, but then you got Powell County with 23. So, you know, we do have some barriers there with the rivers. I'm sure that applies to this scenario because of
how they get.
Because of how they get it, like you said. But I don't know, man. Did you do any research on it? I know that you said that you watched
I watched the Kentucky Field where the guy was kind of answering questions, you know, caller questions, and one of them was about it. But I kind of read in on it. It's, you know, kind of a natural thing happens every like 5 to 7 years.
Right.
It's happened in 97, 2002, 2003, 2007, and last time was 2012. And it's kind of something that, you know, it's never taken out more than 25% of the deer population. And it's something that kind of will stop spreading once, you know, heavy freeze comes in.
Right.
So, I mean,
but it's been kind of we're still to the point where it's kind of unnaturally warm.
Yeah.
And I also read something that and I don't know if they touched on it or not when you watched it, but it typically only happens when it's really dry, which I found was really odd because we've had a lot of hurricanes and everything else that's brought a lot of rain our way. But thank goodness I've only heard of the one case. I just went out and checked my trail cameras today, and the bigger deer that we've kind of had our eye on are still alive at this point. So, just really crossing our fingers that it doesn't hit us hard.
Yeah.
I've worked very hard over the last couple of years to kind of build the deer herd to what it is now, and it would be pretty devastating to me personally to watch that. I mean, obviously I would still rebuild and pursue it, but it would be pretty devastating to kind of watch all of my work go away and all these animals that, I mean, everybody thinks that being a hunter, you don't care about animals.
Yeah,
and
it's
you
probably the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all you're doing is taking out the deer that need to be taken out that may naturally go by starving to death because they can't eat or, being too weak to defend themselves by predators. I mean, any death that they're going to have naturally in the wild is far less severe than what we're going to do as far as killing them quickly and humanely. And so a lot of these deer, I watch them from the time that they're a fawn or 1 year old to the time that they're 3 to 5 years old. And once you're getting the 5-year-old deer, you're getting to a pretty ancient deer as far as the years go. It's not like an elk or a moose or anything else that lives to be a whole lot older. With the deer, 5 to 7 is a pretty ancient deer, and we've got some that I would estimate being in that 3.5 to 4.5, maybe in 5.5 years old. And so obviously they've been around, they've survived, cold, awful winters, they've survived hunters and everything else, and we've really tried to keep the predator population down low for them to flourish and being able to breed and kind of growing that. And it would be pretty devastating to have a bot fly come in and kind of take that all away. So I'm hoping that we survive it, but if we don't, we'll rebuild, like I said. And I think it's to the point now where if our older deer were starting to kind of drop from this, then we probably wouldn't continue with the hunting season and just try to rebuild. But to this point, we haven't lost any, so all systems are go still right now. So
heard Ted's record there for archery season, like opening weeks. I mean, it's still going to be. It's never taken out more than 25% of the deer population.
Right.
So, I mean, I still think.
Is that 25% in the state of Kentucky or 25% anywhere it's ever been?
Like any that's been studied.
Right.
Like, so I guess, or like any group.
It's really difficult to say how they even come up with the numbers in the state of Kentucky. Like we talked about before, I think Kentucky's becoming more of a destination for professional hunters. I've seen a lot of professional hunters post stuff about being in Kentucky and having kills. Even Nick Munt from Bone Collector, he killed the deer in Kentucky and actually cut open the nasal cavity, and that's where he found the botfly larva. And it was pretty eye-opening for me. So that's a big-time professional hunter here in Kentucky that is not only taking a deer in archery season, but also talking about the botfly issues. So I think that Kentucky's definitely on the upswing. I feel like it's only going to get better, and it's awesome to hear that it's I guess a record season so far, because that means that there's a lot of money pouring into the fishing game, and that's obviously going to help deliver more habitat and everything like that for them. So I guess we'll just see. Did you read or did they talk about what specifically happens to kill the animals?
Like how they die?
Yeah. I know it's something to do with hemorrhaging, but it never was specific.
I think that's it. Just brain hemorrhaging. Like hemorrhaging.
So, and I assume it's probably has something to do with the larva.
But it's saying they get just like there have been reports of people finding them like laying against their patio.
Oh yeah,
like they're not scared of they'll just
it's like
wherever they can.
It's like a little drunk child or something that's wandered into your backyard. I saw a video of one spinning circles in the middle of the road, and another one that was laying in the backyard, and a little chihuahua barking at it, and the guy was like patting it on its head. I mean, I would say at this point, if their brain is hemorrhaged, then they're probably there's the lights are on, but nobody's home, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just really sad way to go. But I guess that's nature. Like I said, everything in nature is going to be far more severe death than what the hunters actually do, unless you're just an absolute unethical hunter, which obviously we try not to be. So, anything else, bud?
That's it. I was going to talk about the Latrell Sprewell shoes again, but
yeah,
I remember.
I don't think it. Ain't nobody got time for that. So
I'm saving up my coin already.
Yeah, so Dada will be in the next big.
I'm putting stock in it. Yeah, once the feds take out Adidas.
Yeah, they're going straight for Dada.
They take out Adidas and Nike. It's gonna be Big Baller Brand and Dada.
Big Baller Brand.
They're gonna be competing for like the major schools.
They're gonna be siphoning all that money in, bringing in the players. So, well, I guess we appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll announce what's kind of next for us. So me and Dave are gonna sit down and have a little talk about kind of our plans for what's next. So tune into social media on Facebook and Instagram, and we'll post kind of the latest stuff on what we plan on doing. We'll try to get this video out to you a little bit sooner than we did last week. Apologize for delay. Like I said, I had a modem issue, so I wasn't able to actually get it up fast. So, but we appreciate everything. Like I said, check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Double Axis Podcast, and we'll see you the next time. So, see you later.